The ship was cold, felt the chill deep in her bones as the alien soldiers pushed her and the other humans down the metal corridor. The walls were dark gray, and strange symbols glowed in red along the ceiling. Everything smelled like iron and something bitter she could not name. She kept her head down and her shoulders hunched. Her thin body shook with each step, and she coughed softly into her hand. The alien soldier behind her made a sound like laughter. "Look at this one," the soldier said to his companion. "She can barely walk. Humans are even weaker than the reports said." Stumbled and caught her arm to steady her. "Are you okay?" whispered. His face was pale with fear, but he still tried to protect her. He was a good man, a diplomat who believed in peace and talking. He had no idea what was really happening. "I am fine," said quietly. Her voice was small and tired, just scared. Nodded and kept his hand on her arm. Around them, the other members of the human delegation walked in silence. There were 12 of them in total, scientists, diplomats, and translators. They had come to this meeting with hope. They had believed the Empire wanted peace. They were wrong. The soldiers were massive. Each one stood at least 8 feet tall, with thick scales covering their bodies like natural armor. Their eyes were deep orange, and they had 3 of them arranged in a triangle on their faces. Their hands had 4 fingers, each ending in a sharp claw. They moved with the confidence of creatures who had never known defeat. The corridor opened into a large room, looked up slowly and saw him. "Commander." He sat on a raised platform at the far end of the room, watching them with cold interest. He was even bigger than his soldiers, 9 feet tall, with scales so dark they were almost black. Scars covered his arms and chest, each one a mark of battle. His armor was decorated with bones, and knew those bones did not come from animals. "So these are the famous humans," said. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "The species that thinks it can negotiate with the Empire." Stepped forward. Even though his hands were shaking, he kept his voice steady. "Commander, there has been a misunderstanding. We came here in peace. Earth wants to establish friendly relations with your empire. There is no need for this hostility." Laughed. The sound filled the room and made several humans step back in fear. "Peace," repeated. "You speak of peace because you are weak. Your planet has no fleet. Your soldiers are soft. You have nothing we want except your world itself." He leaned forward, his orange eyes fixed on. "And we will take it." "The Galactic Council will not allow this," said. "There are laws, rules of first contact." "The Council is far away," replied. "And they do not care about a small planet on the edge of the galaxy. By the time they hear about this, Earth will already belong to us." He raised one clawed hand and made a gesture. The soldiers moved quickly, grabbing the humans and separating them into groups. Felt rough hands close around her arms, and she cried out softly, letting her body go limp. "Please," she whimpered, "please do not hurt me." The soldier holding her lifted her easily with one hand. He looked at her the way someone might look at a small insect. "This one is sick," the soldier announced. "She weighs nothing. I could break her with 2 fingers." Stood and walked toward them. Each step made the floor shake slightly. He stopped in front of and looked down at her with something between amusement and disgust. "Is this the best your species has to offer?" he asked. "Fragile little creatures who cry at the first sign of danger." Did not answer. She kept her eyes on the floor and let tears run down her cheeks. Her whole body trembled. Tried to move toward her, but 2 soldiers held him back. "Leave her alone. She is just a translator. She has done nothing wrong." Glanced at with mild interest. "You try to protect her. That is almost admirable, but useless." He turned back to his soldiers. "Put them in the cells. Keep them alive for now. We will use them to send a message to Earth." The soldiers began dragging the humans away. Was carried like a doll, her feet barely touching the ground. She continued to cry softly, her thin frame shaking with each sob. But inside her mind, Everything was quiet and calm. She had already counted 27 soldiers in this section of the ship. She had noted the placement of every door and the pattern of the lights. She had studied his movements, the way he shifted his weight, the old injury in his left leg that made him favor his right side. She had memorized the weak points in the armor, the gaps under their arms, the thin scales at the base of their necks, the way their third eye was connected to their nervous system. Had been trained for this moment since she was 6 years old. Earth was not as defenseless as it appeared. 20 years ago, when the first alien signals were detected, the governments of the world had come together in secret. They knew that one day, humanity would face species stronger and more advanced. They knew that talking might not be enough. So they created a program. They found children with the right potential and trained them in ways that would make normal soldiers sick. They studied every alien species they could find information about. They learned their bodies, their weaknesses, their fighting styles. And they created weapons that looked like ordinary humans. Was one of those weapons? The soldier threw her into a small cell. The door closed with a heavy sound, and she was alone in the darkness. Slowly stood up. She wiped the tears from her face and rolled her shoulders. Her eyes adjusted to the dim light, and she began to examine her cell. The walls were solid metal, but the door had a simple lock. The ventilation shaft in the ceiling was narrow but not impossible. She sat down in the corner and waited. They thought she was the weakest one among the humans. They thought she was sick and scared and helpless. They had separated her from the group because they believed she was no threat at all. That was exactly what she wanted. In the distance, she could hear giving orders to his soldiers. He was already planning his attack on Earth. He was already counting his victory. He had no idea what was coming. Closed her eyes and let her breathing slow. Her heart beat steady and calm. In a few hours they would come for her. They would try to use her to break the other humans. And that is when she would show them what a human could really do. Hours passed in the cold darkness of the cell. Did not sleep. She sat in the corner with her back against the wall and listened to every sound around her. She could hear the heavy footsteps of guards walking past. She could hear the distant hum of the ship's engines. She could hear her own heartbeat, slow and steady. The door to her cell opened and light flooded in. Raised her hand to shield her eyes, making herself look weak and confused. A soldier grabbed her arm and pulled her to her feet. "Move," he ordered. He dragged her down the corridor to a larger cell where the other humans were being held. When the door opened, rushed forward. "Are you hurt? Did they do anything to you?" "No," she said softly. "They just left me alone in the dark." The soldier pushed her inside and closed the door, stumbled and fell to her knees. Several humans helped her up and guided her to a corner where she could sit. There were 10 humans in this cell. Was there, along with 2 other diplomats. The rest were scientists and staff members. Their faces were tired and scared. Some of them had bruises from the rough treatment. A woman sat down next to. Her name was, and she was an engineer. She had short black hair and sharp eyes that noticed everything. "You look different," said quietly so only could hear. Turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" "In the corridor you could barely walk. You were crying and shaking. But just now when you fell, you caught yourself perfectly. Your hands hit the ground at exactly the right angle. That is not how a scared, weak person falls." Was silent for a moment, then she smiled slightly. "You see too much." "I am an engineer," said. "I solve problems by watching how things work, and you do not work like a fragile girl." Looked around the cell. The other humans were too busy with their own fear to pay attention, was trying to comfort the younger staff members. The scientists were discussing possible escape plans in whispers. "What I tell you stays between us," said. "Can you promise that?" Nodded slowly. Earth knew this might happen. Not exactly this, but something like it. They knew that one day we would meet aliens who were stronger than us. aliens who would look at humans and see prey. His voice was calm and steady, nothing like the frightened whisper she had used before. So they prepared. Prepared how? They created people like me. We were trained since childhood. We studied alien species, their bodies, their weaknesses. We learned how to fight things much bigger and stronger than us. We learned how to hide in plain sight. Stared at her. You are a soldier. I am something more than a soldier. I am a weapon that looks like a victim. Glanced at the door where shadows moved as guards walked past. They think I am the weakest one here. That is why they separated me. They want to use me as an example, to break the others. So what are you going to do? I am going to let them take me, and then I am going to show them what humans can really do. Before could respond, the cell door opened again. 3 soldiers entered, their orange eyes scanning the humans. Behind them stood a taller figure with silver marks on his armor. Lieutenant, second in command. Commander has decided to send a message to your planet, announced. His voice was cold and official. One of you will be taken to the arena. You will serve as a demonstration of what happens to species who challenge the Empire. The humans pressed back against the walls. Fear filled the room like a heavy cloud. His eyes moved across the group, studying each human carefully. Then his gaze stopped on. That one, he said, pointing at her, the small one. No, stepped forward. Take me instead. I am the senior diplomat. If you need to make an example, use me. Looked at him with something like pity. You think this is a negotiation? How very human. He gestured to his soldiers. Take the girl. 2 soldiers moved forward, let out a small cry and tried to back away, but they grabbed her arms easily. She struggled weakly, her feet dragging on the floor as they pulled her toward the door. Please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. Please, I do not want to die, please. The soldiers laughed. One of them lifted her completely off the ground, carrying her like a piece of luggage. Do not worry, little human, the soldier said. It will be over quickly. You are too weak to last long in the arena. As they carried her out, looked back at the cell. Her eyes met for just a moment, and in that moment saw something that made her breath catch in her throat. Was not scared. Behind the tears, behind the trembling and the begging, his eyes were calm and focused. They were the eyes of a predator wearing the mask of prey. The door closed and was gone. They carried her through long corridors filled with soldiers. Word had spread quickly that a human would be killed in the arena. Warriors gathered to watch her pass, mocking her weakness and laughing at her tears. Look at it shake, one said. Are all humans this pathetic? They say this is the weakest one, another replied. The others are not much better, soft species. They will make poor slaves. Listen to everything. She counted the soldiers. She memorized the layout of the corridors. She noted which ones had weapons and which were unarmed. When they reached the arena, the noise became overwhelming. Thousands of warriors sat in the stands, their voices creating a roar that shook the walls. The arena floor was a large circular space covered in dark sand. Old stains marked places where blood had been spilled before. Commander stood on a raised platform above the arena, watching with cold satisfaction. The soldiers threw onto the sand. She landed hard and stayed down, curling into a ball and crying. Citizens of the Empire, his voice boomed across the arena. Before you is a representative of the species called humans. They come from a small planet on the edge of the galaxy. They thought they could negotiate with us as equals. Laughter filled the arena. This female is the weakest among them. She could not even walk without help. She cries like a child. Raised his hand. To show our mercy, we will not have our champions kill her. Instead, she will face 3 of our basic soldiers. Let the galaxy see how easily humans break. 3 soldiers stepped into the arena. They were young but still massive compared to. Each one carried a short blade, and their scales gleamed under the bright lights. Slowly got to her feet. Her whole body shook, and she looked around with wide, terrified eyes. The crowd cheered for blood. The first soldier stepped forward, raising his blade. And somewhere deep inside, a switch flipped. The fear disappeared. The trembling stopped. Her eyes became sharp and cold. It was time. The first soldier was young and eager. He wanted to impress Commander. He wanted to show his strength by crushing the weak human female in front of thousands of his people. He charged forward with his blade raised high, ready to end the fight with one powerful swing. He never saw what happened next. Moved, not like a scared girl, not like a trembling victim. She moved like water flowing around a stone. One moment she was standing still, and the next moment she was beside him. Her hand shot up. It was a small hand, thin fingers, pale skin. It looked like nothing, but it hit the soft spot under the soldier's jaw, the place where the scales did not cover the nerve cluster beneath. The impact was precise and powerful. The soldier's eyes went wide. His body locked up. His blade fell from his frozen fingers and clattered on the sand. Then he collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. Silence. The crowd stopped cheering. The roar of thousands of voices died in an instant. Every eye in the arena stared at the small human standing over the fallen soldier. Straightened up slowly. Her face was calm. Her breathing was steady. She looked at the two remaining soldiers with eyes that held no fear. "What happened?" someone in the crowd whispered. She touched him, that is all." "That is impossible. He is a trained warrior, she is just a—" The second soldier did not wait for understanding. He attacked with a roar of anger, swinging his blade in a wide arc that should have cut in half. But she was not there. She ducked under the blade so smoothly it looked like dancing. Her body flowed forward, getting inside the soldier's guard, too close for his weapon to reach her. She pressed her palm against his chest plate at a strange angle. It looked like nothing, a gentle push, the touch of a child, but had trained for years to understand how bodies worked. She knew that their internal organs were protected by thick scales and muscle. She also knew that sound traveled through their bodies differently than through humans. A vibration at the right frequency, applied at the right angle, could pass through their armor and shake their organs like an earthquake. The soldier stumbled back. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Dark blood spilled from between his teeth. He fell to his knees, then forward onto his face. He did not move again. 2 soldiers down, less than 3 seconds. The crowd was completely silent now. Even Commander had risen from his seat, his orange eyes fixed on the arena floor with something that might have been confusion. The third soldier looked at his fallen companions. Fear appeared on his face for the first time. He raised his blade defensively instead of attacking. "What are you?" he demanded. Tilted her head slightly. When she spoke, her voice was soft but carried clearly in the silent arena. "I am human." She moved again. This time, everyone watched carefully, trying to understand what they were seeing. But it did not help. She was too fast. Not impossibly fast, but faster than anyone expected. Faster than a creature with such a small body should be able to move. She closed the distance in 2 quick steps. The soldier swung his blade down, a killing strike that should have split her head open, but was already moving sideways. The blade missed her by the width of a finger. She jumped. Her legs wrapped around the soldier's thick neck. For a moment, she hung there like a strange ornament, her small body pressed against his massive frame. The soldier reached up to grab her, but she was already twisting. Necks were strong. They were protected by heavy scales and thick muscle, but between the 3rd and 4th vertebrae there was a small gap, a point where the bones connected, and if that connection was twisted in exactly the right way. The sound was sharp and final. The soldier's arms dropped to his sides. His legs gave out. He fell forward and rode him down, landing lightly on her feet as his body hit the sand. 3 soldiers, 4 seconds. stood in the center of the arena, surrounded by fallen warriors. There was no blood on her hands. There was no sweat on her face. She was not even breathing hard. She looked up at Commander. The silence stretched out like a living thing. No one knew what to say. No one knew what to think. They had just watched the impossible happen. On the platform, his hands gripped the railing so hard that the metal bent under his claws. His face twisted with emotions that warriors were not supposed to show. Confusion, disbelief, and something else. Something that his people had not felt in centuries. Fear. How? The word escaped from his mouth before he could stop it. That is not possible. She weighs nothing. She has no claws, no scales, no natural weapons. How did she do this? One of his advisors stepped forward, his voice shaking. Commander, perhaps we should reconsider. Reconsider what? Snarled. He turned away from the railing, his mind racing. 3 soldiers meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. They were young and inexperienced. This proved nothing. But deep inside, a cold doubt had taken root. In the arena, waited patiently. She knew what was coming. She had planned for it. She had hoped for it. Turned back to face the arena. When he spoke, his voice was loud and commanding, pushing away the doubt he felt inside. So the human has some tricks, some hidden techniques. This changes nothing. He raised his hand and a horn sounded across the arena. Let us see how she handles real warriors. Send in the bone breakers. The crowd gasped. The bone breakers were legends. They were the 12 greatest warriors in the empire. Each one had conquered planets, destroyed armies, and never known defeat. They were not soldiers. They were forces of nature. A massive gate on the far side of the arena began to open. The ground shook with heavy footsteps. 12 figures emerged from the darkness, each one bigger and more terrifying than the last. They wore ceremonial armor decorated with the bones of their enemies. Their scales were marked with scars from 100 battles. They carried weapons that had ended thousands of lives. They surrounded in a wide circle, looking down at her with cold, professional eyes. These were not young soldiers eager to prove themselves. These were killing machines. Looked at them one by one. She studied their armor, their stance, the way they held their weapons. She saw the old injury in one soldier's knee. She saw the blind spot created by another's missing third eye. She saw every weakness they thought they had hidden. She smiled. On Earth, she said calmly, we have a saying, never judge a book by its cover. The bone breakers did not know what a book was, but they understood the meaning well enough. Lieutenant, who had come to watch from the arena's edge, felt his blood run cold. Something was very wrong here, something that all their power and strength could not explain. The human girl stood among 12 of the deadliest warriors in the galaxy. And she was smiling. The 12 bone breakers stood in a perfect circle around. They did not rush in like the young soldiers had. They were veterans of countless battles. They knew how to be patient. They knew how to work together. The leader of the bone breakers was called. He was the oldest among them, with scales that had turned gray from age and battle. He had killed more enemies than he could count. He had never met anything that could defeat him. He studied the small human female in front of him. She was tiny. Her arms were like thin sticks. Her body looked like it would break from a single hit. Everything about her screamed weakness. But he had seen what she did to the 3 soldiers. He was not foolish enough to ignore it. Move together, ordered his warriors. Give her no space to escape. Overwhelming force. The bone breakers nodded as one. They began to close the circle slowly, their weapons ready. Watched them come. Her body was relaxed. Her mind was clear. She had trained for this exact situation. 12 enemies moving together. Limited space. No weapons, just her hands, her knowledge, and her speed. She had been waiting for this her entire life. The bone breakers attacked. They moved as a single unit, weapons swinging from all directions. There was no gap to slip through, no opening to exploit. They were a wall of death closing in on a single point. Any normal human would have died in the first second. Dropped to the ground. The blades passed over her head, and for a moment the bone breakers were too close to each other. Their weapons almost hit their own companions. They had to adjust, and in that tiny moment of adjustment moved. She rolled between the legs of the nearest warrior. Before he could look down, she was already behind him. Her hands found the thin scales at the base of his spine. She pressed 2 fingers into a nerve cluster that they did not even know they had. The warrior's legs stopped working. He fell forward, crashing into 2 of his companions. Was already moving to her next target. She leaped onto the back of a bone breaker who was turning to face her. Her hands wrapped around his head, fingers finding his third eye. The third eye was connected directly to the nervous system. It was their weakness, and they had protected it with thick bone for millions of years. But pressure was not the only way to attack it. Knew that a specific vibration, a specific frequency of sound and motion, could pass through the bone and reach the nerve beneath. She had practiced this technique 10,000 times on training dummies built to match biology exactly. Her palm pressed against the bone above the third eye. Her fingers moved in a rapid pattern, creating the exact vibration needed. The warrior screamed and grabbed his head. The pain was beyond anything he had ever felt. His body shut down and he collapsed. 2 down, said quietly. The other bone breakers hesitated. They had never seen anything like this. Their companion was not bleeding. He had not been cut, but he was down and not moving. Roared in anger. She is just one human attacked together. They rushed in again, but now fear had touched their hearts. They were faster and stronger than her in every way, but somehow it did not seem to matter. Danced among them like a ghost. She was everywhere and nowhere. When a blade came down, she was not there. When claws reached for her, they grabbed only air. She moved between the massive warriors like water flowing through rocks. And every time she passed a warrior, she left damage behind. A touch to the inside of a knee joint, the warrior fell. A strike to the soft scales under the arm. The warrior screamed as his arm went numb and useless. A precise blow to the throat, finding the gap between the armored scales. The warrior choked and gasped for air. One by one, the legendary bone breakers fell. The crowd watched in absolute silence. Some had covered their eyes, unable to believe what they were seeing. Others stared with mouths open, their minds refusing to accept the truth in front of them. Was the last one standing. Around him, 11 of the greatest warriors in the galaxy lay on the sand, defeated by a creature half their size. "What are you?" demanded. His voice was rough with fear and rage. "You are not human. Humans are weak. Humans are prey. What are you?" Stood before him, barely breathing hard. A small cut on her arm was the only mark on her body. 11 of the deadliest warriors in the Empire had only managed to give her a single small cut. "I am exactly what I appear to be," she said, "a human." "That is a lie." "No," shook her head slowly. "That is the truth you refuse to see. You looked at us and saw soft bodies, no claws, no scales. You saw weakness, but you missed something important." She stepped closer to him, raised his weapon, but his hands were shaking. "Humans are weak," continued. "That is true. We are not born with natural armor. We are not born with weapons. We are not born strong. But that weakness made us clever. It made us study our enemies. It made us find ways to fight that do not require strength." She moved, swung his weapon with all his power. He was the greatest warrior of his generation. His speed was legendary. His strength was unmatched. It did not matter. Was inside his guard before the blade could touch her. Her hands moved too fast to follow. She touched points on his body that should not have hurt, that should not have done anything at all. Felt his body stop responding. His arms went limp. His legs gave out. He fell to his knees, then onto his face. 12 bone breakers, 37 seconds. Stood alone in the center of the arena, surrounded by fallen giants. She was not tired, she was not scared, she was simply finished. She looked up at Commander. "Humans only look fragile," she said. Her voice was quiet, but in the silent arena, everyone heard her perfectly. "We have spent our entire existence fighting things bigger and stronger than us. We became smart instead of strong. We became skilled instead of powerful. And we have been preparing for species like yours for 20 years. Stared down at her. His mind was trying to understand what had just happened. His body wanted to run, to get as far away from this impossible creature as possible. "You prepared for us," he managed to say. "We prepared for everyone," smiled softly. "Did you think Earth was really defenseless? Did you think we sent our diplomats into space without protection? We knew this day might come. We have been waiting for it." In the holding cell, pressed her face against the small window that showed a view of the arena through a screen. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she was not crying from fear. She was crying because for the first time she understood. Humanity was not weak. Humanity had never been weak. They had simply been hiding their true nature, waiting for the right moment. The moment had come, and the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. Commander descended from his platform. His heavy footsteps echoed through the silent arena as he walked toward the center where stood. The crowd held their breath. Every eye followed their commander. Was still the most powerful warrior in the Empire. He was still 9 feet tall with claws that could tear through metal. He was still covered in scars from battles that had broken entire civilizations. But something had changed. As he approached, he found that his feet did not want to move forward. Something in his ancient warrior blood was screaming at him to stay away from this small, fragile-looking creature. He ignored the feeling. He was commander, he did not run from anything. "Your tricks will not work on me," he growled as he stopped 10 feet from her. "I am not like the others. I have killed things that would make your nightmares seem like pleasant dreams." Looked up at him calmly. "I believe you, but that does not change anything. I will crush you myself," raised his claws, "and then I will destroy your planet." Before he could take another step, an alarm screamed through the ship. Red lights flashed across the arena. Froze, his warrior instincts recognizing the sound immediately. It was the battle alarm. Something was attacking the fleet. Lieutenant ran to the edge of the arena, his face pale with shock. "Commander, multiple contacts around the fleet. They came out of nowhere." His eyes went wide. "What contacts? Show me." A massive screen activated above the arena, showing the space around the fleet. What saw made his blood run cold. Human ships. Dozens of them had appeared from nothing, surrounding the fleet in a perfect sphere. They were not as large as the warships, but they bristled with weapons that looked far more advanced than anything humans should have possessed. And at the center of the human formation was a single massive ship, bigger than anything that had ever built. It hung in space like a silent giant, its weapons pointed directly at its flagship. A voice came through the communication system. It was calm and official, speaking in perfect language. "Commander, this is Admiral Park of the Earth Defense Fleet. You currently hold our diplomatic personnel hostage. We are here to retrieve them." Could not speak. His mind was still trying to understand what he was seeing. Humans were supposed to be a primitive species with no fleet. They were supposed to be defenseless. The voice continued. "You have 2 choices. Release our people and leave this system, or discover what else humanity has been hiding. We strongly recommend the first option." In the arena smiled slightly. "I told you," she said softly, "we were prepared." Turned to look at her. For the first time in his long life, he truly understood that he had made a terrible mistake. He had underestimated the humans. He had looked at their soft bodies and seen weakness. He had never considered that weakness could be a disguise. How, he demanded. Our intelligence said you had no fleet, no advanced weapons, nothing. Your intelligence only saw what we wanted them to see, shook her head. We knew we could not match the galaxy in strength, so we hid. We built our ships in secret. We trained our warriors in shadows. We made everyone believe we were harmless. She gestured at the screen showing the human fleet. 20 years of work, 20 years of hiding, and now you see the truth. Looked at the screen, then at his fallen bone breakers still lying on the sand. His mind calculated the odds. His fleet was surrounded. His best warriors were defeated. And something told him that the small human female in front of him was the least dangerous thing the humans had sent. Commander, Admiral Park's voice came again. We are waiting for your decision. Closed his eyes. He was a warrior. He had never surrendered in his life, but he was also a leader. He had thousands of soldiers who would die if he made the wrong choice. Release the prisoners, he finally said. The words tasted like poison in his mouth. Soldiers rushed to obey. Within minutes, the human delegation was brought to the arena, saw standing among the fallen bone breakers, and his mouth fell open. What happened here? She walked over to him and took his arm gently. I will explain later. We are leaving now. As the humans were led toward a shuttle that would take them to the Earth fleet, stepped in front of. His soldiers tensed, ready to fight, but he raised a hand to stop them. One question, he said, how many like you are there? Looked up at him. For a moment her face was completely unreadable. Enough, she answered. Then she turned and walked away, leaving standing in his arena surrounded by his defeated warriors. The shuttle lifted off and flew toward the Earth fleet. Through the window, watched the flagship grow smaller. Around her, the other humans sat in shocked silence, still trying to understand everything that had happened. Sat down next to her. So what happens now? Now the galaxy knows, replied. They will spread the word. They will tell others what happened here, and the next species that thinks about attacking Earth will think twice. But they will also see us as a threat. Good looked at her with steady eyes. It is better to be feared than to be prey. The shuttle docked with the main Earth ship. Admiral Park was waiting for them. He was an older man with gray hair and a face that had seen many battles. He saluted formally. Agent, excellent work. Thank you, Admiral, she saluted back. I am glad the fleet arrived in time. We were always nearby. We just needed the right moment to reveal ourselves. He smiled slightly. Your performance in the arena was broadcast to the entire fleet. By tomorrow, every species in this sector will have seen the footage. That was the plan. 1 week later was back on Earth. She sat in her small apartment, surrounded by plants and books. A cup of tea cooled on the table beside her. Through the window, she could see the city going about its normal life. People walking, children playing, cars driving past. None of them knew what she was. None of them knew what she had done. A knock came at the door. Opened it to find standing there, looking uncomfortable. Can I come in? She stepped aside and let him enter. He looked around at her simple apartment, at the poetry books on her shelf, at the flowers on her windowsill. This is not what I expected, he admitted. What did you expect? I do not know. Weapons on the walls, training equipment. He shook his head. You took down 12 of the deadliest warriors in the galaxy and you live like a normal person, smiled and poured him a cup of tea. That is because I am a normal person. Being dangerous does not mean I have to live like a weapon. Sat down slowly. How do you do it? How do you live with what you are? Was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the peaceful city below. Being gentle is a choice, she finally said. Being dangerous is a necessity. I choose to be both. She turned to face him, and for the first time he saw both sides of her in the same moment. The soft, kind woman who loved poetry and flowers, and the deadly warrior who had humbled an empire with her bare hands. Humanity survived because we learned to be more than one thing, she continued. We are soft and hard, weak and strong, peaceful and dangerous. That is what makes us human. That is what makes us impossible to defeat. Outside, the sun was setting. The sky turned orange and pink, painting the city in warm colors. Somewhere in space, the fleet was retreating, carrying with them a message that would change how the galaxy saw the small blue planet called Earth. They had come looking for prey. They had found something else entirely. In the days that followed, reports came in from across the galaxy. Other species were talking about what happened. They were sharing the video of a small human female defeating 12 giant warriors. They were discussing what it meant. Some saw it as a threat, some saw it as a warning, some saw it as hope. But all of them learned the same lesson. Never underestimate a human. And never ever mistake kindness for weakness. The galaxy was vast and full of powerful species with claws and scales and natural weapons. But humanity had something none of them possessed. They had spent their entire existence being the weakest, and in that weakness, they had found a different kind of strength. Finished her tea and picked up a book of poetry. Outside, the stars were coming out, each one a distant sun with its own worlds and its own stories. Humanity was no longer hiding, and the universe would never be the same.